at RX931, the Monster YouTube channel at RX931, and twitch.tv/Monster RX931. You heard on Thursday's host, Nikki Porter. Stand by and enjoy the program.
Welcome once again to another episode of Heard on Thursdays. You got me, Nikki, for some awesome Heard on Thursdays tonight, the show that made Philippine FM radio talk. And tonight, we have yet another hot topic for summer, and that's food. Because it's Filipino food, all the more reason to want to gush over it and just talk about it. Because what do we do over the summer, right? Aside from going to the beaches and doing partying and hanging out with your family and friends, we eat. Best way to actually have a conversation as well is to eat. And we do that a lot during summer. So whether we're home enduring the dog days of 2022 or if we get the break, enjoying the beach, the mountains, or our home province on a vacation, we eat and then we also drink a little bit. Now, April is Filipino Food Month. Tonight's guest is someone who knows Filipino food, who cooks very well, and in fact has made it his mission to promote Filipino food to the world. He's only in his mid-30s too, but he is already one of the most acclaimed chefs in the country. He is the founder of the Filipino Culinary Heritage Movement. Perhaps it's no surprise that he is Kapampangan, since Papanggeños are famous for their cooking. And among the renowned restaurants that he spearheaded are Villa Cafe and Bite Contemporary Cuisine. From 2013 to 2015, he was commissioned by the Philippine government via the Department of Agriculture to be the chef ambassador, representing the country in the ASEAN Roadshow, Linamnam, flavoring the Philippines. And in 2017 of October, he was chosen by the UNISG in Italy to be the first Filipino chef to present and cook Filipino cuisine. Heard on Thursdays, Chef Jam Melchor. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Nikki.
Hi, such a pleasure to talk to you. We're talking Filipino Food Month, talk a lot of food, especially Filipino food. A favorite, of course. So I want to know, Chef Jam. Do I call you Chef Jam or Jam? Which would you prefer?
Jam will do. I mean,
Okay.
My name is Food, so
Your name is. That's a good one. That's a good one. Okay, so Jam. Since you also experienced all the highs and lows of the pandemic, and now it is picking up again. May I know what have you been up to in the 2 years that we have been on lockdown, aside from your career of being a chef? Any latest binge, latest new hobbies? Go ahead, share it.
well, before I answer that, I just want to give a special shout out to Reese Rayos of the Foodie Station.
Oh,
In the past 2 years, I found myself pivoting with so many stuff. I had to work with a lot of farms. Before I don't have time to get out of the town and visit some farms. So I found myself liking it actually to be in the farm most of the time, to visit and harvest, meet some farmers, and a lot of webinars, a lot of online conferences. I think my Zoom is overused.
wow. Well, may I know, what are these webinars usually, and what are the conferences that you've been invited to this far?
These are actually learning sessions, teaching young students to appreciate low food
Mhm.
and cook virtually, without them having to taste it. Perhaps just imagining the food that I cook.
Gotcha. And sayang, no? Sayang if it was in person, no? Baka mas ma-enjoy pa nila kasi it would be live cooking and you'd learn so much more also if you were there. But unfortunately, we are still trying to adjust to the new normal. But for now, after the pandemic though, so let's talk about Filipino food. Do you think that the cuisine will continue making its mark in the world culinary map?
Oh, definitely. I mean, um, our food is very diverse, and we have been braving the waves all these years,
Yeah.
the pandemic and other forms of insecurities. But as per Philippine food, I think we are on the right track because the trend now is food tourism,
Yeah.
and we have been promoting our local food not only in international level but locally.
Gotcha. And also I feel like Filipino food has sort of become a little bit more known because of like, social media and how active it was throughout the pandemic. So you have these TikTokers, Instagram influencers who started to introduce how to like what Filipino food looks like for one thing, and then how to cook Filipino food as well. So I think it's really great. Did you consider before to start like TikTok or Instagram, at least for the sake of promoting Filipino food?
I'm actually I'm actually contemplating to do some more of the videos,
Yeah.
but I'm not quite sure if my family will appreciate it.
Why not?
No, I'd rather do ground stuff. I mean on-site stuff rather than do some dancing while cooking, while eating some mukbang.
Gotcha. No, I totally understand, and I'm sure you'll find a way eventually to introduce it, like have your own flavor, pun intended, to your videos. Should you consider it? Now, if foodies abroad who don't know Filipino food at all ask you, what what is Filipino food? How would you usually answer them?
Um, that's an interesting question because whenever somebody from a new country would ask me, What's the best Filipino food that represents your country?" I always tell them it's quite diverse. Like, give me an island and I'll tell you what specific food
True.
there is in that place. Because I don't think that there's um, one dish that can actually represent us.
Mhm. Yeah, and I know because I asked this question because again, there are so many. We have thousands of islands. We have a number of provinces and regions as well that have their own distinct tastes and flavors. So I want to know though, how did your interest in Filipino culinary food begin?
I grew up in Pampanga, and that place is considered as the food capital of the country. Everybody know knows how to cook, and it's a shame if you don't know how to play around with food or live around with the traditional recipes. So it really started there, and the passion I think ignited when I started to take up culinary arts as formal education, and then from there it went on and on. I haven't stopped.
So you never, or hindi mo naisip na, okay, I'm not going to focus on any other cuisine. I want to put the spotlight on Filipino cuisine talaga, like from the get-go, when you started to learn how to cook, up to you studying and then graduating from college.
Well, I was thinking kasi a lot of chefs have their own specialties. But for me, kahit nakapikit, I think I know my food well. So that's what I really work with over the years. And it
Mm.
truly represents who I am.
Yeah, for sure. And I also want to know, like you're growing up, you learn how to cook, and you start to learn at least from the kitchen, and you have these people who will help you or just introduce you to the kitchen, how to cook. I want to know what your start was like. Did Was it like a lola? Was it a tita? Was it your mom? Or was it somebody else in the family? Or even friend who introduced you on how to cook?
Well, my grandparents loved hosting parties. They were quite involved with organizations around our town and the local political system. And they just love to host people. You know, they are people person and they find ways to uh, host a party, an event. And from there, I think our palate was exposed, my palate was exposed with good food. And it is through them that I really appreciated my heritage, the food heritage.
Mm-mm. Yeah, and so I'm sure during when your grandparents would host those parties, would you also be like in the kitchen na parang at first sa may table ka, tapos bigla na lang you were in like that whole process of actually cooking.
Oh yeah, I will always, mess around with the kitchen. Pag nahiwa na yung kamay ko, aalis na ako.
Totoo, medyo nakakatakot minsan. So, well, actually, that's a good question. That's a good point that you brought up, actually. Like, how did you deal eventually? I mean, you're dealing with knives, a lot of dangerous things in the kitchen as well. Like, how do you deal with it? Does it get easier dealing with it as you are longer in the kitchen?
Yeah, I mean, cooking is an art eh. You need to learn these things kahit na mahirap. Of course, sometimes you will cut your finger or you will lose a hand, ganyan. Depende. Kailangan talaga. And cooking is an art. So, there.
And so now that you're in the kitchen, been there for many years already. What's the Filipino dish that you've mastered? Like the number one, like okay, easy. I'm sure there's a lot that you could be like, you know what, I can close my eyes, I can do this with my eyes closed, and then I can bring it to you and serve it to you. But what's like the Filipino dish that that's your favorite and that you've mastered making?
Okay, my favorite and the one that I mastered talaga is kare-kare. I use all types of nuts from macadamia, pistachio, pili, cashew, all types of nuts I've tried.
Wow. Is there a particular like nut though that parang that has like maybe not the traditional kare-kare flavor, but then it's like, oh, this is distinct. This is like, I could get into this.
I like pili because pili is indigenous to our country.
True.
Its taste is similar to macadamia.
Oh, macadamia is a little pricey. So pili, I guess, is the way to go to try and spice things up for the kare-kare. For all the monsters who are listening, this is Heard on Thursdays. I am talking to Chef Jamil Chor, and we're talking about Filipino food, Filipino cuisine, as it is Filipino Food Month after all. Now, in a country of more than 7,100 islands, do we really have a Filipino cuisine? Because I know there's a lot of regions that would argue na parang, no, our adobo is better. So, like, how do we give it a definition, our Filipino cuisine, since it is so diverse?
I think the conversation should be uh, how can we make things Filipino? Like, for example, when we talk about spaghetti, I'm sure that's a big question mark if the sweet spaghetti is a Filipino dish.
True.
I think it is. If it's made by a Filipino, if the ingredients came from the Philippines, it's already Filipino. Filipino food has been indigenized. And whether or not it's Kapampangan, Ilocano, Bicolano, Cebuano, all of these are Filipino dishes. It's just up to us to know which are the dishes to promote, to use, to consume, and to, share out in the world, with the world.
Yeah. And so, do you think that with our cuisine, no matter how diverse it is, do you think that we Filipinos are proud enough of our Filipino food, like other nationalities, Italian, Spanish, or closer to home, even the Thais or Indians? Do you think that we're proud enough, like they are, or do we usually tend to downplay our own native dishes, or Do you think that we sometimes feel ashamed of them as well?
I think that the Filipinos just love our cuisine. Um, they would die for it. In a debate, whether it's adobo versus sinigang, you can see two types of Filipinos. That's how much they love their cuisine. And wherever you go, I've been around the world and I've met so many people, so many different Filipino communities across the globe. they would always serve Filipino food in their events.
Yeah, and it's something. Well, I would imagine, and of course, as a Filipino as well, you can't. I don't think you can go wrong with serving Filipino food unless we do have this habit of offering, balut, dinuguan, all of these other exotic delicacies. So what is your take? What is your take when Filipinos go for the extreme and offering those delicacies to foreigners?
I think there's this percentage of Filipino that really just like the fear factor show, and they want to make fun out of their friends. That's why they're showcasing balot. But I mean, if you are promoting our food, and for example, that person or that event is something really special, you should showcase other types of dishes. I mean, we have a lot of Filipino dishes to begin with.
And if you were to do offer a delicacy, not maybe not the extreme one. Let's say like just a simple pwedeng kainin like on the spot, like just like a little snack. What delicacy would you actually offer to a foreigner? So at least they get eased into it slowly.
Well, Filipinos begin their meal with rice and end their meal with rice. So perhaps a rice cake,
Mm,
or when you're in the States, they would usually serve pancit, lumpia. When you're in Europe, they would serve hardcore dishes. There's distinct Filipino food that they serve in these regions.
gotcha. So, well, I guess for all the monsters who are tuned in, not necessarily balot or dinuguan. Try something a little lighter then, so at least they won't be so your foreigner friends won't be so averse to the cuisine from the get go. Now, what do you usually serve to those who have zero experience of Philippine cuisine? Like as an introduction, if you were to make a meal, a Filipino meal, what's your go to?
Of course, we definitely take into consideration these people. I would serve adobo, you know, sisig,
Mm,
sinigang, kinilaw. Kinilaw similar to ceviche. Halo-halo, I think is safe.
yes, I agree. That's awesome. I mean, it's a cool thing that you're mentioning all of those. I was only asking for one, but now it's like a buffet of Filipino food, and I think that's also a smart way to do it because it does line up like different meats, different kind of ways that you prepared Filipino food. So I think that's really cool. That sounds like a great meal to me, and thank you for making me hungry. Now, what is your like? Have you also tried Filipino-owned restaurants that serve Filipino food in your travels abroad? And do you have any particular favorites or any dish that stood out in any one of the Filipino-owned restaurants abroad?
Well, when I was in the UK, I tried Romulos in Kensington. So they really make good Filipino food. I mean, if you're someone who misses home and you're based around London, you should go there.
All right, so Romulus at Kensington. That is going to be in my to-do list. should I visit London one day? Now, what is your take now in or what do you think about there are different we have our Filipino cuisine, but there are different iterations of it, not just regionally but now with our young cooks who are much more creative. They're very unique in the way that they think and want to present Filipino food. So what's your opinion in trying to deconstruct or modernize or reinvent these Filipino dishes that we have?
I mean, um, what's so nice about the young generation of chefs is that they're no longer ashamed in promoting local cuisine, like using Filipino food as a concept of their restaurant. Unlike during the time when I started, what the trend then was fusion cuisine. What now the chefs are so proud that they even support local producers. They try their best to get their ingredients from local farmers instead of using foreign or imported
That's
ingredients.
So that's a really cool way of actually trying to present Filipino dishes. And also, like what you said, using locally sourced ingredients as well to keep it authentically Filipino. So thank you for that. Now, let's talk about the Philippine Culinary Heritage Movement. When did that begin?
After my stint with the government around 2012, there's this realization that came, uh, how come the government is promoting outside of the country? Whereas I think that there's a need for awareness within the Philippines in terms of Filipino food. So I talked to my colleagues in the food industry, the movers and shakers,
Mhm.
and I proposed that a movement be formed, a group that will be dedicated in the preservation of our local food culture. Because back then, there's no official form of recognition, be it a form of a celebration from the government. So that's where we came in.
And so it started 2013, if I'm not mistaken. Or
Yes.
okay, started 2013. And so, what do you hope in the years to come that since it's almost 10 years, I guess, since it started. So, what are you hoping to achieve with the Philippine Culinary Heritage Movement?
Well, one of our goals then was to establish Filipino Food Month as a national celebration. Now, the president of the country signed it into law. We're quite happy about it. That's why we're celebrating April as Filipino Food Month, just like other forms of national celebration. My next wish list, and our wish list as part of the movement, is for the government to make sure that teaching gastronomy and culinary arts will become integrated in the local education system and ensuring its funding in the years to come.
Sure. And also, with this heritage movement, well, the Philippine Culinary Heritage Movement, you said that you wanted to include it in, in education, because people, well, students as well, to have an appreciation of it because they might be more exposed to other cuisines and not really appreciate their own. Would it be included, I guess, like in the syllabus or in the program, like, how they would cook from like palayok or like bamboo? I'm not really sure. I'm not really familiar also, but like, those processes, like in the traditional way of like of cooking Filipino food. Would that be something that would be included in that program?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in other countries, for example, Thailand, they actually include Thai cuisine as part of their early education curriculum. There's a special subject in their elementary uh, curriculum that teaches Thai cuisine at an early age.
Yeah, and I think it would do well to start young actually. So at least there's that nationalistic, I guess, obligation to appreciate our food. Now, what are some of the impressions or the misconceptions that you want corrected about Filipino
I mean, that Filipino food is just pantawid gutom because Filipino food represents who we are. It's part of our culture. And it should be a form of art. It has to be recognized as a form of art.
food? And do you think that, what do you think should students should understand about Filipino food? Like what would happen if they value other cuisines more than their own?
Well, Filipino food is part of the local food system. The entire food system is very big, from production to consumption. So it represents different sectors. And if they only patronize what's local, it also it will also help our economy.
That's very true. And for the monsters who are just joining us, this is Heard on Thursdays. You got me, Nikki, and Chef Jamal Short talking about Filipino cuisine, specifically the Philippine Culinary Heritage Movement. Now, um, you are a major proponent of slow cooking or slow food movement, rather. So, what is this about, or how would you define
Well, Slow Food is an international organization. So I am head of the Philippine branch, handling the youth. We try to save heirloom ingredients or dishes from its extinction by putting it into an online repository, organizing taste workshops, talking about what good, clean, and fair food is. So it's really an advocacy to deal with slow food. It's not the opposite of fast food, but it's really about traceability, sustainability, and insurance that we have a food security. Future.
would you consider like cooking in a palayok on uling as a form of slow food cooking?
Well, it is a technically it can be categorized as a slow cooking, but if we are talking of the slow food movement,
Mm,
it is bigger than that.
okay. What are some examples that you could give us? So at least to enlighten also the listeners, and for those who might be interested also in this particular movement.
I think slow food is present in about 160 countries all over the world, and we have counterparts in each country promoting their own local cuisine. I'm just one of those food activists around the globe that keeps on talking about good, clean, and fair food and how food should be. We
Mm-mm.
deserve decent food. We deserve food that is not processed, that is not instant, that is not fast.
You mentioned about having an online repository for heirloom ingredients, or saving or conserving them, and also I guess the traditional methods also of how to cook. Now, what are some examples, I guess, of these like heirloom traditions that you would like to that you have already added into like this online repository?
Okay, we call this online repository Arc of Taste. So you can Google that. Just like type Arc of Taste Philippines, and there's about 60 plus heirloom ingredients that is close to extinction, such as adlay. It's a grain. It's called job steer in English. We also have duman. Duman is the most expensive type of rice in the Philippines that can only be harvested once a year. Can cost at around 800 pesos per kilo.
Wow, that's
So
very
those two are my examples.
yeah. For Dumando, like where is it? I guess where can you find it? Is it only in a specific region?
Yes, it can be grown only in Pampanga, in Santa Rita. Um, the thing about our local people, most of them are indigenous and can only be found in that particular area because of the terroir, the environment, the
Yeah,
climate.
yeah. And okay, I'm very intrigued by this Duman. Could you tell us? I mean, I'm sure you probably tried it anyway, but could you tell us like what is the profile of this? I mean, it's rice, but it's expensive rice, and you can only harvest it once a year, like you mentioned. So, is it also like something? I wouldn't call it like a luxury ingredient, but it is a rare find, I'm sure. So like, what does it taste like?
Well, it looks like green gold. So it's very sticky, and normally they use it for rice cakes, for desserts,
Okay.
and it can be harvested every December only.
Wow, it's a very specific and a very I guess you have to be extra careful of it, especially when it comes to seasonal rains, because I feel like that would just be devastating as well. If it's only December. My gosh. Okay, so Duman and Adlai, two examples. I was so surprised that Adlai made it to the list. There's that I was like, because I eat it sometimes when I don't want to eat rice, but it's how did it make it into like one like an endangered, so to speak, ingredient?
I think it was around 2014 when we started promoting Adlai with the Department of Agriculture. We find it as a good substitute for rice, especially for those who have diabetes. And we have a lot of, not a lot during that time, Adlai farms. You can only find it in Bugidnon, in Zamboanga, in Region 4. So I think from then on, we had this mission to continuously look for more Adlai to promote.
Gotcha. Well, I guess Monsters, it's a healthier option, so we should consider trying Atlay. And I do want to try the Duman one time, so I'll try and look for it. Where can we find? Is it only exclusively sold in Pampanga, or are there places where they sell Duman?
Well, there are places that you can get Adlai, especially during December. For example, the local agriculture department in Central Luzon organizes uh, fair, and there's this special Duman festival in December because it really involves the entire town, from planting to harvesting to processing. It's part of their culture. That's why you know, most of the food products in the Philippines have their own festivals. If you go to Pangasinan, they have Bangus Festival.
And also, so I guess it has a deeper meaning to it. To want to preserve these heirloom ingredients as well means to preserve actually a culture of a particular place. So I think it's a very noble thing to want to actually preserve that through your the Philippine Culinary Heritage Movement, definitely. Now, Jam, you are only in your mid 30s, but you have achieved quite a lot as a chef and as an ambassador for Filipino food, which I think is a title that's really awesome to have. Now, what do you think are the highest points thus far in your career?
Um, I think one of the most memorable uh, instances when I got invited by the UNISG. It's a gastronomic university in Italy. So when you want to study about food, it's like Harvard. This is the Harvard for food. So I had the chance to cook with the Michelin chefs like Massimo Bottura, Alice Waters, Jimmy Oliver. And then after that stint, my picture was placed in that particular hall inside the university, along with the pictures of the other chefs. I mean, they also published the recipes, the Filipino recipes, in a book, along with the recipes of the other great chefs of the world. So I think that's one of the um, very memorable uh, instance that I have.
Mhm. And so, th- with you mentioning that though, and then seeing your face and like among the faces of other world-renowned chefs, like how did that feel? I want to know how that felt for you as well. I mean, it's a high, but could you try and recall how that felt?
Well, I think it only validated my mission as a chef. Basically, to be an advocate of Filipino food. and to inspire a lot of newbies and up and coming budding chefs to love our own cuisine and never be ashamed to use local.
Now, what are some of the best things throughout your career as a chef and as Filipino food ambassador? What were some of the best things that you've heard uh, people tell you about Filipino food?
Um, During my travels abroad, whenever we join expositions representing the country, I would always encounter foreigners who would taste Filipino food for the first time. And they find it, they find it good. I mean, I, I'm I'm surprised and happy at the same time. But I think it only proves that we have a potential to be in the global map. But it's really important for me, and I've always uh, made sure that this is my mission for Filipinos to love their food first.
For sure. And you always, I know you've seen some of these polls or like these lists about like best Asian food, and then you would see, I think before it was sinigang, and then I think there was lumpia in there. Um, what do you think about those? Like, our Filipino food is being recognized, but then it's only very niche, like only sinigang, lumpia, and all of those only like more popular dishes. But how do you think we can try and push more of our dishes other than like the popular adobo, sinigang, lumpia um, dishes that people around the world are familiar with?
Nikki, I'm really happy every time I see that a certain dish makes it into a certain poll. But I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done inside our own backyard to fix our food system. We should uplift the local food restaurants like the calendarias, the local canteens. We have to improve the quality of the Filipino food that we eat every day for us to be able to move forward and ensure our spot in the global food map.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, we have so much to offer, definitely. And I just like at random though, if there is one other dish that you could compete with sinigang that's still local, like probably not as popular, but something that just has about the same profile, what would it be?
Hmm, that's a hard question.
Or another dish that's about the same, not necessarily the same profile, but should have as much fame.
Well, it's still hard, Nikki. Ang hirap kasi there's a lot eh. And I don't want to single out one dish,
Okay,
given that I'm an advocate for Filipino food.
okay.
But I would say this, that when we talk about Filipino food, whether it's adobo, sinigang, it's sisig, there's always a lot more to discover. I mean, in most of my travels within the Philippines, I always discover something new. And that's what I like about this, our food. It makes you want more or learn more or discover more about it.
Yeah, definitely. And I like that you spoke like a true Filipino food ambassador just a while ago when I was trying to ask you what could compare. But it's a great answer also because, we just have a lot of really good ones. And like what you mentioned, there's just so much more to discover, especially as Filipinos ourselves who are only familiar with, what's in front of us or what we see in like a chain restaurant, a Filipino chain restaurant at least. So we've talked about like the positive, like what the positive feedback that people have said about Filipino food. Now, have you received uh, negative or like yeah, critical comments about Filipino food? Not
Yeah, I mean,
necessarily correct,
a
but
lot.
yeah. Okay, so like what would they say?
I mean, for instance, in the recent years, there's this one Malaysian chef, a popular Malaysian chef. He said that how come that Filipino food is ranking in that particular poll when in fact it is oily, it's browny, it's all pork.
Wow. Rude.
Yeah, so sometimes, well, taste is subjective. Maaring yung masarap sa'yo, hindi masarap sa akin. Ang masarap sa akin, hindi masarap sa'yo. So, that's the nature of food.
Mhm. Do you think though that we need to present our food better? Because I mean, sure, there are some meals that are like, brown for the most part, like adobo. But do you think that we need to work on like a presentation of it, or you know what, it's home cooked meal, so like, why bother?
We need to present our food well, yes, definitely. Because food, the first thing that you feed with food is your eyes. So if the food is ugly, will you eat it? Even if it's good? Of course not. So we really need to invest in terms of innovation, presentation, food styling, especially the younger chefs. But don't overdo it.
Hmm, gotcha. Try and keep it traditional still. Add a little color, but not too much to make it a little bit more presentable. Now, how do you feel for home cooks, especially for those who have started out, especially during the pandemic? Like one of the popular things that we would probably have in our kitchens as home cooks are, instant food mixes, flavorings. They've become a necessity for people who cook at home. Now, how do you feel about these?
I think these ingredients or culinary materials are boon to cooking. But um, cooking is a labor of love. So it's always best to make everything from scratch if you have time, if you have the necessary equipment to do it. But if you feel like using this instant stuff, then go ahead. You're still supporting a certain industry anyway. But as an advocate of slow food, of course, I would always prefer to make everything from scratch. Just like what your grandmother is doing your food.
Right. Yeah. I love, okay, sinigang is my only example for now, but sinigang like with like the authentic, like with meat from sampalok mismo, like that makes a load of difference when you try it with a mix and then have it with the actual food extracted from it. I think that's really great. And so for the monsters who are tuned in, try it. Let's try it sometime. Now, we're nearing the end of the interview. I just want to ask you a couple more questions as well. It's for first one would be like for those budding chefs, the young chefs who are very creative and very unique. What are your last words, I guess, for them before we end the interview? When it comes to, yes, we can appreciate foreign influences, foreign cuisines, but why hone in? Why hone your skills in Filipino cooking?
I think it's important that we take into consideration that our lives is not permanent, and someone or somebody will be on the next line. So we have to make sure that we pass these traditions to another generation, and it's a form of safeguarding our food culture by passing the knowledge, the skills, and everything that you've learned also to the next generation.
And finally, since it is, well, it's summer 2022 and it is Filipino Food Month. So, what tips can you share with our monsters for them to appreciate Filipino food more deeply, at least in terms of cooking?
Okay, there are a lot of activities that has been organized for April this year. They should go to the Facebook page of Filipino Food Month to check all of these activities within Metro Manila, within the provinces, and outside of the country. We have activations as far as Paris, Japan, China, United States. all of this activation under Filipino Food Month. Second, eat local. Support local farmers. Do not buy smuggled vegetables. Make sure that your ingredients came from legit Filipino farmers.
Yeah, totally. Keep it authentic. Keep it authentically Filipino. Before we end the interview, I just want to give a quick shout out again to Reese of the Foodie Station. Thank you so much for making this possible for me to actually speak to Chef Jam Melchor, learn so much, and have gained a greater appreciation as well for Filipino cuisine and how much I don't know actually about Filipino cuisine. But I am so open to explore it. I'm very much game for that. So for the monsters who have tuned in, thank you for tuning in to Heard on Thursdays. Do you want to say hi to anybody, Jam, before we end?
I just want to say hi to all the monsters. I mean, this is Filipino Food Month. It's our topic. You should be eating Filipino food as your midnight snack by this time.
Oh my gosh. Wow. I am hearing you right now. I love midnight snacks. Filipino food it is. All right. Thank you so much. For all the monsters who have tuned in, don't forget to follow us on our monster socials at RX931 on across all platforms. For now, it is in the order for it on Thursdays. I bid you all good night and keep it locked only here.
Monster exclusive interview only on Manila's hottest Monster RX 93.1.